All right, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to Man vs. World. I am your host, Mark Queppet, and I'm joined by my wonderful crew here, Pete and Derek. How you guys doing?
Awesome. How are you?
Doing great. So, Derek, you're back. You missed the last one. Everyone was very upset. How's it going?
I'm good. Did you get some comments?
Good.
Yeah. Was that a thing?
I don't know. I don't actually look at the comments.
I'm like, wait, is that real? Were they missing me?
No, I do look at some of the comments. I do. I value your guys' feedback. I've just found that like sometimes it's just like well, I've gotten much better at this. Like, but back in the day, it would be one of those things where I had to read like every single comment, and it's just like if I got a good comment, which was the vast majority, it's just like feel nothing, except for a slight sense of validation, and then I would get like the one jerk comment, and then it's just like and it's just silly. So I mean, I like what we do. I know there's a lot of you guys out there who enjoy what we do. So you're the ones who I'm here for. And you know what? I'm actually going to read every single comment on this video. Maybe I'll heart every single one, even the haters. All right. So
nice. I haven't checked any of them really, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's like nobody can say something about me that I wouldn't like. I haven't thought about myself, so it's fine.
Well, yeah, it seems like the big personalities online, they're kind of split on it. Like you've got people like Joe Rogan who claims he like absolutely like never reads the comments and promotes that, and then you got people that are in there just like seething over them. It's always weird when you see some like massive name arguing with someone who has 3 followers and like a fake profile picture. Low tier behavior for sure. Yeah. So at the time that this is launching, will the Reforged Man program be closed? I think it will next week.
Likely.
Well, yeah. I guess if we get it out Monday, it will be. It'd still be that last day.
Yeah, so I mean, there may be a last day for anyone here if you want to get into the Reforged Man Gold program. It's our flagship program for quitting porn. It's incredibly powerful, very effective. It's taught by me and my coach Gif, who I actually filmed a great little mini series on quitting porn with him about some of my updated thoughts around quitting porn, and you can get that by clicking the link in this description or the last video description. We'll make sure we put the link in this one too. Yeah, so if you've been struggling to quit porn, this is like how we can help you the best. It's a real game-changing thing. So definitely check that out if you're in the market for that. But today we are going to be shifting our conversation back to the God mode operating system again. And in this one, Pete, what is it that we're going to be getting into today?
So we're talking about the last point in the God mode map, which is the letter P, which stands for the price of transformation. And so apparently this isn't a magic pill that you just take and it solves all your problems magically with no pain. Am I understanding that right? Because if so, I want my money back.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, one of the things in like the self-development sphere that I think is troublesome. It's like you have like these two extremes of like handling the challenge of personal transformation. On one end, you've got like the people who say like, oh, this is the magic quick fix pill. It's going to, be easy and effortless and nothing's going to be hard and it's all going to be comfortable. Then you've got on the flip side, the people that are just obsessed with like the grit and the hard work and just like push it and just like, stay hard and all that kind of thing. And the reality is that it's got to be kind of somewhere in the middle. Like, this is something that I learned from, really, it's just like physical training. As an athlete all growing up, I still train pretty heavily now. And the reality is that like there is a certain point of discomfort that you're going to have to face in transformation. Now, if you make it too light, then nothing's really going to change. You make it too easy, it's too comfortable, and that's all you're focusing on is trying to keep it very easy. You're going to run into massive blocks because you are conditioned a certain way, like through your past experiences. And because of that, some things that are going to be very good for you are going to lie outside of your comfort zone. But if you try and go too hard and you try and take on too much pain all at once, well, that's going to cause massive issues as well, because you're going to break down, you're going to get hurt. Like in the physical training world, it's like you're going to overtrain, you're going to get injuries, that kind of thing. Similar thing happens in life development as well. You're just going to burn out, you're going to get overwhelmed, and it's not going to work. And so, a lot of the stuff we covered in the previous episodes, that's really helps you figure out what is that ideal path. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be that point of discomfort. There's still going to be that stretch, that push that is going to be required for you to make a real change. And so what I want to do with it is get really hyper specific about the mechanics of making these payments, making this investment in yourself, because I think that's the operative piece. That's the sticking point for everybody. Like no one gets screwed up when things are too easy and comfortable, right? Or when things are going smoothly. People get screwed up when things get uncomfortable, right? And so we need to have a clear framework and strategy for how to approach that kind of stuff if we really want to have the highest chance of becoming the person that we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I think what you're saying around where people go wrong, like there's so much stuff out there, there's so much information. You could read a book on how to change your life and blah blah blah. This is where things go wrong, because if everything worked, we would all be having exactly what we wanted in life, and we wouldn't need anyone else to tell us anything or get some information from anywhere else. So obviously there's something that we're not getting, and this is one of the big pieces to that, I think. So and I think this is our attempt, like you said, to try to deconstruct it. And then bringing our faith into it, we can have a deeper understanding of it, and it gives us like a wonderful example. And so that's where it makes it even juicier.
Yeah. And there's a temptation, I think, to like overdo it on this, like particularly from the Christian angle.
Yeah.
I would say, well, I guess actually the Christians, they can take it either way. It's like you have on one side the people who are like, oh, God loves me anyway, so I don't need to do anything hard. And then you have the people who are like, oh, my life like must be the cross. And it's like either they're like this, perpetual martyr, or they are this like, I'm always in God's good graces, even if I don't do anything difficult. So it's like, this shows up in all forms, and really finding that like exactly what you're supposed to be doing, that's the key.
So how do you define a legitimate price to pay? What makes pain legitimate versus unnecessary?
Yeah. It's a great question. Well, this kind of like is what we set up in the previous parts. So you can go back and watch them, but to like give a quick summary, it's like, all right, well, we define the man that we're supposed to be, the man that we are meant to be. And we do that by connecting with our dignity, our callings, and our own unique style. All right. And from that idea of who we are, we can construct a good idea of where we want to go. These are the aims we wish to accomplish. All right. And that includes our highest conception of goodness, target resonance, and then our goals. Okay. So a good payment, then a good sacrifice, is basically the things where we trade our comfort and we realize our aims that move us toward becoming the man that we're meant to be, move us toward that future self that we're called to. And so if it's not doing that, well, then obviously that's a bad payment, right? But this is what it comes down to. It's like there's an exchange. It's like I've been saying this like almost for a decade now, but it's like your comfort is your most powerful currency. You can trade your comfort for almost anything in the world if you do it in the right way. And so that's really what we're looking for here, is like, how do we strategically trade comfort to unlock higher and higher levels of fulfillment and living?
So how do you tell the difference between, because there's difference between feelings of your physical body and feelings of your soul, your emotion, your heart, let's say, right?
Yeah.
So how do you tell the difference because I'm assuming you would say you don't want to act in a way that is against what your heart desires. Is there ever a time to do that? How do you tell the difference between your flesh and your soul in that instance?
Well, I think really the big determiner there is resonance. So if you, like, we define resonance here as an alignment between your instinct and intellect. And so it's like, there will be times where you will know and feel that a sacrifice is necessary and good. Okay. And you can have that knowing. You can, like, to be clear, like, one of the things that I don't know if we made super clear previously is that resonance doesn't always feel amazing. All right. You can have the understanding that, oh, I got to do this thing, and it doesn't feel good, the thought of doing it, but it still resonates. So for an easy example would be, like, say you got into a fight with someone and you said some things that don't really represent your authentic stance or feelings. And you realize, shoot, I gotta go apologize to them. I gotta amend some of the things that I said. That can be a very resonant insight, but it doesn't necessarily feel good. You know what I'm saying? So this is one of these things where it's you have to separate, like, the surface layer of emotional experience from, like, the way it makes you feel on a deeper level of your being.
And this is a practice. Like, it's not. It's always so fresh. Like, no matter how much you practice it too. Like, sometimes it's challenging, but this is the path, right? To practice this, and you will get better. You do get better as you continue to practice it, and there is degrees or depths to our resonance, you know. So we're trying to find the deepest, stillest water in our resonance, you know, so that it's like, okay, this, I know this, I need to do this. Like the sorry thing, you know, like, I know I need to say sorry. Like, I just know I do. It freaking sucks, you know? And that's the like the higher level of the water, where it's like rougher, and, you know, it just like, you're kind of going crazy or whatever. But when you go deeper and you get quiet and you go, okay, let me check my resonance, and you go deeper, and it's like, yeah, no, I gotta do this. It's gonna not feel good. There's gonna be a payment that needs to be made, which is for instance, ego in that situation, you know, the thing you gotta let go of, right? I was right, and that's the payment, you know. I gotta let this go. I gotta make that payment in there, and then it's like, when you make that, and after you're done it all, because you knew through your resonance, your deep resonance, you're gonna go, you see the future of what will happen, the good that will come out of it. It's like Jesus on the cross. He didn't just do it for the heck of it. Like, he knew where it was going. He knew with his Father that he's gonna glorify me through this.
Man.
For everybody. You know, if he didn't know that, didn't have an image of the future, I can't see how he would do it, right? Because you'd just be doing it. You'd be a martyr. Like in our little thing at the end of the guide, if you read it, we have like different sections of, you know, if you kind of rely on one of the three parts of the map too much. So if you just did payments because you just, I gotta just sacrifice, we call that, like, you know, the martyr. So.
Right. And it's really wild too, because as you, like, practice this sort of thing, it becomes something where it gets easier over time. Like, it's like you begin putting layers of your, like, psyche into order, and you start going deeper and deeper, like every, like, kind of like progression. Like, it's like you're like this multi-layered creature. All right. And your understanding of resonance at first, it might operate primarily at, like, this surface level. but you can sense there's something a little bit deeper. And as you start moving your attention to that deeper layer and you start putting your life in order to and around that, all of a sudden another layer opens up underneath it. And you get to the point where your whole external world could be seemingly going up in flames, but you are at total peace in your core. And this is what we're driving toward. This is the kind of thing that it takes a while to build to, but you can get there. And I think like this is where faith is so essential. Like Tony Robbins, I forget his exact quote, but he has a quote something along the lines of like, your speed of progress is directly proportional to your tolerance for uncertainty. And I thought that was really interesting because that's basically an argument for faith. Because how do you have a tolerance for uncertainty? Well, it's faith through as Christians, it's faith that it's going to work out, right? And when you're operating from this place of resonance, like to me, that is the Holy Spirit. You know, that like whatever resonance you can get a hold of, that's the will of God that you have access and are responsible for acting upon. And so when you can like do this, you start living this way, you get to points where it's like, I have no idea what's going to happen. Like maybe Jesus didn't have a full vision. You know, I like to think actually that he didn't have almost any idea what God was going to do with his death. He probably did, but let's say he didn't.
Maybe he didn't know the exact thing, right? But he must have, he had to have faith and hope.
Right.
So
but what if that's all it was, right? What if that's all it
needed
was?
to be, really? Like that was my point.
Right.
Because I'm not theologically saying that, he has like this exact thing. It's just, he was trusting in his Father, that he was good. Like that's really the most important. That's really what matters.
And it's like, it's kind of like, what was it when Abraham, I think I'm getting it right, when Abraham was called to kill his son, right? Isaac. It's like, what? What? It's like, okay, well, I'm going to have faith here that something good is going to come of this. And like, that's an extreme example, but that's the state ultimately that we're called to, is to be able, like if we have a strong resonance for something, and even if we don't quite understand how it's supposed to work out, that we trust that, holy shit, this is the thing to do, and I'm willing to do it. Now, obviously, like the Abraham and Isaac one's a little bit iffy because it doesn't like he must have had a very intense experience with God to justify that. You know, typically you're going to want to make sure that your intellect is more on board to achieve resonance, but that's the kind of thing that happens, is that you have to weigh these things proportionally. So it's like, if you got like your normal understanding of things, but then you're given a supernatural emotional insight, instinctual insight, that should weigh heavier, right? Sometimes God's going to move you very powerfully in one way or the other. Like there have been times when I've had intellectual ideas dropped on me that emotionally I just did not click with, but man, they were compelling intellectually. And so I had to weigh that more heavily, and I had to like lean on that and like dig into that and figure out what the heck was going on. Other times I've had insights that were like very just like extremely instinctual, and I didn't understand them at all on the rational level. And so you have to weight it more. So like gauging the impact of the way different things and insights and callings like hit you is an important part of this process.
Yeah, and also seeing how things move when you're moving towards that, like see how things start happening. What are the results that come from it? And it's tricky too, like, right? Like, cause it doesn't always just happen good right away. Like it all starts coming together right away. It might take a little more time. So there's a nuance to that as well. But generally over time, things should be getting better. Like, fruits should be bearing from, a path. Whether it's external fruits or internal. But that's another way to kind of check in, because, we might feel like we're being called to something really strongly. We start moving towards it. And maybe doing that is actually part of the process of discovering something deeper, Yeah,
so. Exactly. We always got to, be ready to shift or double down depending upon what happens.
Yeah.
That example that you guys gave of having to humble yourself and apologize to somebody, brings me back to the first time I really screwed up and I had to apologize for it.
The first time you screwed up.
The first time I consciously remember.
Last week, and
Last week, the first time I ever did.
No, it was, the reason I remember it. The reason I remember it is because it was really tough. I did not want to do it. I was at my place, and there was one of my friends was jumping on the trampoline, and he was having a good time enjoying himself, and I was just sitting there, and I go, man, that guy's weird. And I was standing right next to his mom, and so he heard about it that I said that of him. So I'm probably 11 or something like that. So I have to call him on the phone. My parents are like, you got to call him and apologize and tell him you think he's a cool guy. And I'm like, okay, fine.
Did
So
you
I get on
actually
the
think he
phone.
was a cool guy?
No, but that's not exactly what they said,
Okay.
But anyway, I called him up, and I mean, I loved the guy. He was a good friend of mine. So
Okay.
I call him, he picks up. I go, yeah, sorry about that. And he's rambling on, talking. I don't even remember what he said, but I just remember feeling like I want to get off of the phone call as soon as humanly possible. I want to be done with this conversation yesterday. I don't want to be talking to you right now because I'm so embarrassed. And that process is just ego being. It's like nails on a chalkboard for your ego and your pride. It's just like, I don't want to do that. But something I realized, it doesn't get easier unless your identity is not tied to your performance. It doesn't get easier because your body's always going to be your body, and you're going to have it until you die. And so as awesome as you might be as a person, you still have this part of you. The problem with being a living sacrifice is living sacrifices tend to crawl off the altar. And so your pride is always like, I know, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But it's the reason it's so hard, I think, is because identity can be so easily tied to performance, your moral status, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm getting better, thankfully. I'm getting to the point now where it's like,
it gets a lot better.
It gets so much better because
you get tested, right?
Yeah. But when you screw up and you do something, you don't have to feel that death of ego every single time. If you just keep it dead, it's a lot easier.
That thing that you said about the living sacrifice, I was supposed to crawl off. That's an awesome visual. But it makes
right.
It makes me think of like, maybe when you're 11, like the person who's going to sacrifice you at the altar, like goes to like look over at the set of knives and crazy, tools.
Yeah.
Right. He just looks over and you're like, I gotta get out.
Yep.
But then like, as you practice, it'll take the person to like have the knife and have it 2 inches away from your chest. And that's when you start freaking out and going, okay, I gotta go.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You just drag it out. You just get better. It's like, oh yeah, it's a big deal. I can do this sacrifice. And then when push comes to shove, we're always going to be challenged a little bit. Christ was bleeding blood, or sweating blood, bleeding blood, sweating blood. So it's like, it's not easy.
But I think, it's not easy
every moment of, it's not every day, right? Like the more you practice, the less of intensity you have to go through it, like with the frequency of it. And then it's like the saints would say, like, where is my sacrifice? They look for it and they relish in it. So there's that level. But you were going to say, Mark?
I was just going to say, there's also like an evolution process that happens with this when you really take this idea of sacrifice seriously. Like, for example, like I used to be very careless with my words and opinions and stuff like that. And, I had those instances where I was like, I was so wrong. And I was very adamant. So I was very adamantly wrong. And like those kinds of things are deeply humbling. And part of me just wanted to like be like, screw it and just like ignore it. But I didn't. And, I learned from it. And, there's an evolution that occurs where it's like, so for example, I became very, very careful with my words, sometimes in a marketing sense, maybe even too careful, because I want to make sure that I'm always, telling exactly as much of the truth as possible. But that's what starts to happen is like with that carefulness of speech, then all of a sudden I stop having to make that uncomfortable movement again of like admitting I was wrong. And so it's like this thing is like you have like a progressive layer, you have this progressive escalation of sacrifice where it's like you're only going to take on what is appropriate for you to take on right now, and then you're going to master that layer, and then it's the next layer, and then it's next layer, and you're playing on a bigger and bigger you're playing a bigger and bigger game as you keep going.
One thing that I would love to share is this something that's for me around this sacrifice is like thinking about the other side. Like, and I kind of mentioned it about my thought, whether it's wrong or right about Jesus knowing, right? Okay, that's with Jesus on like the biggest act of human history. But what about in our own life? You know, with the small little things, you know, like I think we have enough experience in our life where we can look at all the little sacrifices that we have made, and we saw on the other side, we look and we go, oh, look, it sucked. I was crawling off of the altar. Yep. But like every time I look at the other side of it, and it was always this awesome thing. It was a good thing. It was a transformation. And then right. I think that's a great thing for us to do is we look at all the different times we've sacrificed, so that when we come to those moments where we know we're being called to sacrifice, it could be the smallest thing, like waking up in the morning at the time you want to wake up, or doing that thing you have to do for work that you just don't feel like doing. That is a sacrifice, right? You go, okay, I don't feel like doing this. We can just imagine and envision. It kind of goes with that future self aspect of this framework, that it's engaging the imagination, it's engaging your vision for the future, and you go, okay, I've done this before, I've sacrificed before. Every time I do this, when I have this feeling that I have right now, where I know I need to do this thing, there's that discomfort. And then the more, you look at it, you're familiar with it, this means that I'm going to come to the other side where it's going to feel great. And you're thinking about it while you're doing it so that it helps you. I mean, there's a point where you have to just accept it fully without, but if you can just, think about how that's going to actually get you to where you want to go.
This picture that Mark paints that I love is you come to the end of the road and you're at a cliff and you're like, okay, I have to step off of this cliff. So you take a step, and it's like a piece of you falls and dies on the rocks, but the real you takes a step up because there's a hidden staircase there that you didn't see. And it's like the more reps you give to that, the more you're like, okay, I'm here at the cliff, but I know I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
If this part of me dies. Is that a fair way to paint it, Mark? How would you put it?
Yeah, I mean, that is the image I use. I use that a lot for like the idea of like quitting porn. Like, for when someone does that seriously, it feels like they are, they're going to die. But, actually, yeah, and a part of you will, which is what we're looking for. But another part of you starts to rise up. And as you do this, as you start embracing sacrifice in this like voluntary manner, I think one of the coolest things that happens is you start unlocking like the capacity for what I call pre-gratitude, where like you can look back at all these instances in your life and you say, oh wow, things got better because of X, Y, and Z reason. And this I think is even strengthened further by anyone who has like an understanding of like story, narrative, literature, etc. The best stories have the hardest difficulties, right? And like the best hero transformations are always when that hero was like the most challenged. And so it's like you can look back in your life and you can be like, oh, wow, that's exactly what happened. Every time I voluntarily faced the challenge, I became a lot better. And you start being able to actually imagine this. You're like, oh, well, this is really hard. How am I going to be on the other side? Oh, wow, I could go this way, it could go that way, it could go another way. And it even gets to the point where you don't even need to necessarily be able to see it. This is like a weird brag, I guess, but it's like some of my proudest moments of my life are when I was going through the absolute hardest things I had experienced, and I was able to say thank you to God, because I was like, I don't know what the heck you're doing. Honestly, like you could stop doing this anytime, but I believe that what you're going to give me for this, or like what this is doing, is actually so much more powerful than, you know, than the price that I'm paying. And like when you can move from that place, that's when fear really starts to evaporate and you can take big, bold steps forward. So that's the kind of stuff that gets unlocked psychologically when you really embrace this path of like forthright payment.
Yeah. In all things give thanks. That reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we should probably start getting into the actual pieces of the payment here. Pete, did you have like a question about those? Or?
Well, let's dive into number one, which is the plan. So what is the plan underneath the price of transformation?
Okay. So the last piece of the previous section of the aims you wish to accomplish was we gotta end up with some resonant goals, basically some outcomes that really click with you. But then, all right, the first part of doing something about that, making the payment, is coming up with a plan. All right, you know that's pretty obvious. You know, planning is a big part of self-development and everything like that. But just like with the selection of the goal, we need to make sure that the plan to achieve the goal is just as resonant as the goal itself. And this is something I see that gets missed a lot for guys. It's something that I've definitely missed a lot in my past. It's this idea that, okay, I'm going to have this big, awesome, juicy goal. All on board, sounds fantastic, but then when it goes to implementing it, all of a sudden you're just like white knuckling it and forcing it. You like spent 2 minutes thinking about how you're going to do it, and it's like, oh, this is the logically optimal way to do it, and then you try and force yourself to follow that logically optimal plan, and that doesn't work. That's not resonant. That's an imbalance where you're going way too much intellect, not enough instinct, and you know, that's something we want to avoid because that will exhaust you. It will overwhelm you. It'll make the journey like a terrible slog. Okay. The flip side of that is like you think of the big juicy goal and then you go way too instinctual with it. You just think, well, what's the easiest way I can get there? And that can get you caught like either just moving way too slow to the point where you're actually just going to lose interest because you're not making any progress, or it's going to get you chasing like quick fixes and hacks and shit like that. And so what we want to find is that middle ground approach, right? Like there's a million different ways you can usually accomplish any given goal. And you need to pick the one that both rationally you believe can work, but then also emotionally it's like, I'm willing to actually walk that. Mm-hmm. I'm willing to actually follow that plan. And so nailing down the plan in this way is really the key. This is something that I've, had to get extremely good at in helping, coaching guys, because, if they don't have a plan that like they know is going to work, then it's just not, right? And you can tell right from the beginning, like whenever I come up with a plan with a client, it's always like, okay, so what's your, like, how do you feel about this plan? I just ask them that. And if their first reaction is anything other than, yeah, it's great, this feels awesome, it's something like, oh yeah, I think it's right. If it's something like that, it's like I can tell there's resistance there. There's something that's off. And it's like sometimes they're just like, yeah, I mean, we got a plan. It's just like, okay, this is not the plan then. Like you can tell immediately if you're going to follow it or not. And so that's what you want to make sure that like the most important thing about the plan you construct is it's got to click. It's got to be resonant. Like
hearing you talk about it, it just like the whole framework just all comes together like at this point, because, that's why it's so important to go through the whole thing, and actually get to know each part and do the work, because if you don't have your aim, if you don't have your man, it's going to be very difficult to have that discernment of whether or not it's the plan. Like when you think of the plan, it's the one that you want to go pursue, because you've got to have a sense of your dignified axioms, your callings, your style, your HCG. You got to understand about what that's all about. You got to understand resonance and finding your target resonance. You've got to understand your goals. And then you've got to understand how this payment thing works, because if you think anything that has any kind of resistance to it or struggle or whatever is like all bad, then you're just going to go like, you're going to only look for the easiest way. And so anything that has a little bit of challenge, you're going to go, but that's not what you want. You want to have an understanding. But then on the other hand, if you're going to go too far on that and be like, I need it to be like, the most difficult, so that, because that'll mean that it's most good for me. And then, then you're going to go too far on that. You're going too far on the other side. So it's just, I'm seeing how like really important it is for anyone to just get all the different aspects and put it all together. And of course it's going to be a journey, but don't skip a piece here.
Right. And just to give you like an example of this. All right. So I heard that something that's like 90% of like young kids these days, they want to be like an online influencer. Okay. And so it's like, here's what, like most people, they understand, all right, I need to have goals. I need to have plans. So for example, if you're missing the man aspect in that, like understanding yourself, understanding, your dignity, your style, and your dignity, callings and style, if you don't have any idea around those sorts of things, then what can happen is like, you're just going to look at the templates of success you see around you and just try and shoehorn yourself into them. So like practical example for me is like, I'm like decent on video, right? And I can write pretty well, but I'm not great on like social media, keeping up with trends. I'm not the kind of guy who wants to be in there on every single comment thread. I'm not like, my networking skills aren't great. Okay. And it's like, those are things that it's just like, that's just how I'm wired. I have to know like what makes me tick in order to construct a good plan for me. And if I never thought about that, then I would just be trying to like copy someone that I see. And this, like the copying stuff, that's great when you're first figuring things out to run experiments and things. But ultimately, you want to be ending up really working with your strengths, your unique aspects, and resonance is going to be the thing that allows you to do that. So, you can't, like Derek was saying, you can't skip on these parts. We're trying to create an integrated whole. And if you do it right, then you do take off like a rocket.
100%.
So taking this to a practical example, I'm going to make up this is not a real example. I have a friend who wants to be a unicycle riding juggler comedian. Okay. And he wants to go to Texas and he wants to move to Austin and he wants to set up at Joe Rogan's Comedy Club and he wants to perform there 5 days a week because that's his dream. Okay.
Okay.
And so you sit down with him, Mark, and you say, okay, well, what's the best way to do that? And he says, well, I should probably write some jokes, just when the juggling, when I inevitably lose I drop the balls and it's not entertaining anymore. I need to have some jokes ready to go. And you go, okay, you don't seem terribly excited about that. It's not like I'm not seeing this spark in you. You're not really lighting up when you tell me this. You seem kind of down on it. And he goes, yeah, well, that's because I hate writing jokes. Okay. So does that mean that there's another path that he can take, or does that mean that the goal is maybe not a truly aligned one to begin with?
Well, you got to dig into it. So you have to see like, well, why do you hate writing jokes? Okay. Because that's where we like these things, you need to dig into them. So for example, maybe he hates writing jokes because he's written bad jokes in the past. He would love to write jokes, but it's just, he gets stressed. He thinks about, right. Yeah, he hates the process of like workshopping the joke and that sort of thing. Maybe writing jokes is exactly what he's supposed to be doing. Maybe it's not at all. And so it's like anytime you get resistance, it's like this little fractal of information. And as you start pulling it apart, you start realizing like what it's connected to. Because that little resistance, that could demolish the whole goal, or it might just actually uncover a limiting belief or a limiting mindset that this guy has that just needs to be tweaked. So, you can't look at resistance as a hard stop. Really, it's the exact opposite. It's an invitation to dive in and understand yourself better. Because as you understand yourself better, then you're going to be able to figure out, well, what's the most resonant path to deal with this resistance? The whole thing is about resonance. So it's like, if you find the resistance, then the next goal is to figure out, well, what's the most resonant way to resolve this resistance?
I love that. Yeah. Okay. So if he goes...
That's why on the framework, resonance is going around everything.
Yeah. And so if this guy says, okay, well, I hate writing jokes because I hate the feeling of when I write one and I think it's awesome and then I go do it and everybody laughs at me.
Yeah, great.
And then you go, okay, so why do you hate it when everybody laughs at you instead of with you? And he goes, because I guess that means that I don't know, I just don't like it.
It's like, well,
what do you do from that point? So here's another stop point. How do you get even deeper past that?
Well, you got to try and get him to put words on his resistance. Like that's the thing, is like, if you're processing resistance, like this is almost like coaching theory or, mindset theory. It's like anytime you have resistance, the most important thing that you can do is pull it out of the instinctual embodied realm of a feeling, and you got to put it into words. And when you put it into words, that does like a weird thing neurologically. It's kind of like it takes that emotion and it puts it in containers. Like if you think about it, like prior to that, it's just like this free floating energy, almost like water or like, electricity bouncing around. But once you put it into words, it becomes this thing that we can move around, we can rearrange, we can reshape. And so that's the biggest thing, is if you can articulate it, then you can start to manipulate it. And I don't mean that in like a negative way. I just mean like you can start to work with it. So really the capacity to translate emotional information into logical language, that's what gives you then the groundwork to work on this thing holistically. You can work on it with your cerebral cortex and your limbic system at the same time, which gives you so much more leverage over your internal state than if it's just one or the other.
Well, and just by, the person who's listening who actually has that same problem or something similar, when they're listening to you say that, they're going, okay, well, so if they look at the man, right, the dignified axioms, the callings and the style, this is related to callings, right? So it's, and a bit of style, I guess, but they're going, well, so is this about my calling? Oh, no, it's not. I've just identified that it's that I don't like being rejected. Okay.
Right. Well, that could be about
my
dignity.
Calling that I don't like. Or it may not be because we still haven't decided whether this is his calling. But let's just continue that it is. Well, he doesn't like rejection. Okay, has nothing to do with his calling. So, okay, if we could why do we get rejected? Well, maybe because you're not very good at it, right? I mean, you're always going to have some rejection. So, but is he good at it? Maybe he's just not very good at it yet. But if it's his calling, then, he can go, well, no, I want to be good at it. It's like, for instance, the networking thing that you were saying, Mark. Maybe you actually really would love to be great at networking. Or maybe you saw that you needed it and wanted it. I'm just saying, like, that, like, just because we're not good at something, it doesn't mean it's not our calling.
Yeah. Well, that's where dignity gives us the superpower, yes. Because dignity is like the thing that lets you make whatever sacrifice is necessary for your own highest conception of goodness, right? And so it's like that's the root thing. I was actually making the videos for the coaching course around the God Mode operating system today, and I spent a decent amount of time on this dignity concept and digging into it, and digging into those dignified axioms, and getting people to wrap their head around them. Because when you get that, then it doesn't matter what kind of resistance you run into. And it's interesting because the whole this map it loops. So the payment part, it loops back into the man that you're meant to be. And the first part of the man that you're meant to be that this all plugs into is your dignity. So it's like, if you want to be able, it must pass through that first to cycle back into the system. So it's like when you give, when you are making a payment, that is justified by you believing you are worth that investment. Mm-hmm. And so as long as you have that solid, then you're going to be able to do whatever the heck it is that you feel called to.
And you're not going to feel bad about being not good at something. right?
Right.
Or
Exactly.
you're not going to,
Because you're going to separate your worth from that status.
and you're also not going to feel an obligation to be good at networking, for instance, because you might be like, well, that's
Right.
not my calling nor my style, so it's okay because I've got dignity already. so like this is all coming full circle. We're on the last piece, and it's a circular thing, always working with each other. That's why we need to get into each part of it.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the next point here, which is number 2, surrender. So what is surrender in this context?
So surrender is a real interesting one. It has like a negative connotation, I think, for a lot of guys. You know, guys want to always be in this like, oh, never surrender sort of attitude. And ironically, it's that attitude when misapplied, which is the biggest obstacle to personal improvement. Because like for energy to flow, okay, for energy to, like if we want water to flow through a tube, okay, on the side that the water's flowing out, okay, if we want a big strong flow, we want it busting out the other end, okay? But in order for that to happen, there has to be the opposite happening on the other end, all right? There needs to be a total openness. If there's any blockages or clogging on that other end, then it's not going to flow through. It's not going to come out powerfully. And so it's like, this is like a yin and a yang sort of thing, where it's like, if you want to be incredibly dominant in your sphere of influence, in your calling, you want to be just like, you know, just thunderous energy output, okay? That requires on some level a deep level of submission, okay? And so it's like in this context here of payment, the surrender really is about surrendering to that resonant plan you just came up with. That means like you need to prostrate yourself to the process. You need to soften to allowing the transformation to take place. You need to become pliable and submissive to your plan. Okay? And if you do that, that'll allow you to strongly and dominantly implement the plan. But the reason I really wanted to highlight this is because there is a different character to surrender. All right. It is a softening. It's not a hardening. It's not a flexing to it. All right. Like the guy who comes to me and he's like, yeah, I'm ready to transform my life. I'm ready to quit porn. I'm ready to, level up my productivity. I'm ready to, kick butt in the gym. And he's just like, oh, rah, rah, rah sort of energy. That guy usually struggles mightily. All right. Either that, because if he didn't, he wouldn't be coming to me in the first place. What's going on usually is that he approaches the challenges of the resistance he faces by just trying to punch through it and flex. There's a tension that he builds up when in reality there needs to be a loosening, a relaxation, a surrender to the path. And when you can do that and you realize and that relaxation reflex is the first thing that's your response to the challenge, that's when you really start to do better. This is something that I've had to learn really deeply in kettlebell sport. Kettlebell sport, you just swing kettlebells for 10 minutes straight. You don't put them down. All right. Kettlebell sport is as much about relaxation as it is about actually doing the movements and flexing the muscles. Because if you're tense, if you have too much tension in that process, you're going to get gassed like that and you're screwed. All right. And it's this is why when you see people who are performing at their highest levels, they're not tense. What are they? They're loose. They're loose and they're only tense right where they need to be. And so this surrender concept, I think, really taps into that, and it really keys our mind to here's what needs to be happening internally if we want to really implement our plans.
Part of surrender, I think, as well, that you touch on is you surrender the distractions. You say, this is my plan. This is my dignified plan. And there's these million other opportunities coming my way. I'm going to surrender those up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a good point. Cause that's what, when people think of focus, they think about the one thing that you're focusing on. Okay. But practically speaking, some of the hardest part of focus is actually just letting go of all the other
Eliminate.
shit, right? All the other stuff. Yes. The elimination aspect. And this is hard, especially when you're trying to go from good to great. Because in order to go from good to great, you might have to surrender things that are actually doing pretty good. right? And we get attached to these good things because they give us a sense of security. Like, if I get really comfortable running a 6-figure business, but I want to run a 7-figure business, I can't do the same things. I can't stay in my little comfort zone. All right. I have to surrender some good things so that I can get far better things. Yeah.
Who's this guy?
And Derek, yeah. And Derek just has to admit that, I'm always right. Like, that's just the way it goes.
This is how it was, Derek.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Alex Hormozy has an awesome video on the woman in the red dress. And the woman in the red dress is this character from the Matrix movie who I don't even remember.
Did you ever actually see the Matrix movie?
I did, and I don't remember the scene. So I'm wondering if it's in like the second movie or something.
No, it's in the first one.
Okay.
Go watch it again.
I'll have to watch it again. Apparently it's been a while. Anyway, Neo's walking by on the sidewalk and everybody's dressed the same. And here comes this woman in the red dress. And he's
in the Matrix simulation, sort of.
And his head is just, oh, wow, look at that. And then Morpheus says, were you listening to what I was saying, or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? And Morpheus says, look again. And he turns around and it's an agent with a gun in his face. So Alex Hormozy uses this to describe opportunities that come his way. And he makes this point that you think you say no to the woman in the red dress once and it's over. But he makes the point that as you evolve and grow and get better, she just keeps getting more and more attractive and your head just keeps wanting to swivel. And it makes sense because if you're a 7-figure business and now you're not having to say no to 6-figure opportunities.
Red dresses, yeah.
See what I'm saying?
And
it's interesting.
It's not just with money, of course, and like business size is a great, first example, but this whole thing, God mode, this is that. Like, the more God mode you go, the more women in red dresses come around.
Right.
Because this is so, like, unique, so special, so it's so much higher. I'm losing the grand words here, guys. It's like who does this? Who does this work? Who's gonna live their life like so freaking amazingly like this? Not very many people. So What does that mean? It means you're gonna look different. You're gonna do things differently. You're gonna live uniquely the way God's made you. And so we're all made uniquely. So then that must mean that we have to live uniquely, right? At some degree.
Right.
And the more that we dive into this work, this God mode, the more unique you're gonna be. The more unique your life's gonna look. The more of a reflection of God's goodness and love it's gonna be, because you're gonna be more yourself. And so I would argue it's even more than like the business example, because anyone can have a 6-figure business or 7-figure business. A lot of people have them. Millions of people have them. Well, not anyone else on this planet is going to live God mode out like you are.
That's exactly it. I mean, like, God is the master artist, okay? And he doesn't repeat his art. He's not like some band who had like found a formula and they just keep churning out album after album in the same style. Every single human being is a unique artistic work. And like when you realize that that's you, a completely unique artistic work, it's like you have to find that, and finding that, like, that's your treasure. When you can figure out what the heck does that mean in my life to live that artistry. Like, I was saying this to a client the other day who's, very successful. He's like a very high performer and kind of famous. And I was just talking to him, trying to figure out a way which he could connect with. And I'm like, you have to live your life where it's like constant art. Every moment is like your chance to paint on the canvas of reality. And, if you're not an artistic person, that might not resonate with you, but like, that's still how it will end up being if you walk this path. Every single instance is an opportunity for you to add your unique signature flair to how you go about things. And that unique signature flair of you, that's God's unique signature imprinted into you. It's one and the same. I used to think that like, oh, well, if I do God's will, then I'm going to lose myself. No, it's absolute bullshit. You will find yourself. you will find yourself, because God's will for you is the most unique, the most cool, the most charismatic, the most head-turning version of you that can exist. And so it's like, by embracing this surrender to the plans, the resonant plans, the things that actually click with you, you're going to be able to find out what that character is.
Yeah. I'm so excited for Christian men who want to go down this route, because as myself as a Christian man, I have not seen anything like this, and it puts everything together. I find that it's easy to kind of take some of the ideas in our faith, and as an ambitious man, it's easy to kind of take it in the wrong way, and I hope we're doing a good job of, I believe we are. I mean, like empowering that man, to be completely who God's made them to be. And it's good. It's not scary. You don't have to go do something you don't want to do. It's about actually being at home.
It does. That's the thing, is it feels more and more at home. Even while you're stepping out of your comfort zone, it feels more and more at home.
That's been my experience.
That's the thing, is you feel free. You start to feel free, even when you might be having 10 times more responsibility than you've ever had. You feel free because you're free to be you.
Awesome. Well, if you want to find out what the third point is, should we talk about that, or should we leave it as a teaser? Because I know Derek has a heart out.
I could do 5 more minutes, but I could always leave and you guys can continue if you have to.
Okay. Yeah. So let's just
dive in. So transmutation, Mark, what is it?
All right. So transmutation. This is the final piece of the payment, and this is where the rubber really hits the road. Okay. And this is about transforming the pain of sacrifice into the new thing. All right. If you go back to where this idea of transmutation came from, it was these ancient alchemists. They were really dead set on figuring out how to turn baser elements like lead into gold. And they had all these, magic chemical formulas and stuff like that. But as the study of alchemy progressed and whatnot, it became more of an understanding. This is a psychological process. That's really kind of what they came to. And this is the truth of it. It's you need to come to understand that your voluntary facing of discomfort is a transmutative process. And that's really what a holy sacrifice is, a dignified sacrifice is. You go back Old Testament style, okay, the way they did sacrifices, they would, take something valuable, that would hurt them to give up, a lamb or something. That's prime food. And food was much more scarce back then. Okay, they would take this thing, they would take it to a temple, they would put it up there, they'd kill it and burn it. Okay, it's then the offering would go up to God, and the idea was that they were going to get something, a blessing from God that was worth far more in return. And we do this same thing, only the temple is our body. Okay, the altar is right here in our heart, and this is it's a skill. It's a tangible physical event where you voluntarily allow the discomfort to burn inside of you. You embrace the uncomfortable feeling, but you shift the mindset and you let it in. You allow it to pass through you. All right. And it comes out in the form of new thoughts, new actions, etc. And that is the point of transmutation. That is the point where you are taking something quote unquote bad and turning it into something good. And it's this internal process, which is the key that finally turns the wheel and allows you to move to a next level.
If someone could master that, you've mastered life.
Yep.
So
that's the thing.
So you want high leverage practice on something. This is it. This is God mode, guys.
Right. And so it becomes this thing where it's you learn how to have this flame. It becomes the flame, right? This burning feeling of voluntary sacrifice. This is what passion is. Passion is the willingness to suffer for what you want. This is why all art, all the best art in some ways is a processing of pain. Whether it's in the act or the concept or whatever it is, there's some pain involved. Even if it's just the pain of wanting to create something great and it's not quite there yet. It's the willingness to step in that fire, stoke that fire, let it burn through you, and let the good stuff come out. And so, like, when we can voluntarily step into that, we can allow that to pass through our nervous system, and that's something that you gain conscious control over as you build awareness around this. Then from that point, you pretty much can't be stopped once you learn how to do this.
So, why would someone want to go through that pain? What's on the other side of that makes it worth it? Like you give the example of the Old Testament version of, hey, you're not going to be you're not going to be held accountable for your sins if you do XYZ, etc. That's a pretty good motivation when the earth is swallowing up people, But for us today, what is driving us to go through that pain?
Well, it's our goals.
Your map.
That's the thing, is if we have good, strong, resonant goals, then that's our reason, right? Because we're ultimately sacrificing so those goals can become a reality. And so it's like, if you've got the good goals, then you should have a good reason to do this.
It's like so profound. I don't know how much more I can add to it. Like this is the heart of life.
So if I was to say, okay, I want to practice this, Derek, you mentioned, hey, if you want something high leverage to get good at, I mean, this is the thing. So how do you have the awareness to understand, okay, I'm in a situation where I can practice this instead of just running away from that pain? Because I think that's what, especially myself, run into. It's like, oh, I feel maybe there's an opportunity to dive deep here, but I'm going to
first thing would just, like, anytime you start feeling resistance and pain of some sort, just practice being aware of that and going, oh, okay, wait, what is this? That's a very, very first step, is just practicing your
translate
awareness.
it into words.
Yeah, like just,
Mark
this is that moment. This is that moment. The more you do that, the more you're going to notice when the moments come up. Mark,
right?
Would you have?
Yeah. So really, what this is, like with this transmutative sacrifice, it is neuroplasticity in action. At least the voluntary kind of neuroplasticity in action. Neuroplasticity can also happen in other ways, but like in this case, like sacrifice,
sanctifying neuroplasticity
like this is. Yeah, that's what's happening. It's like, so really, when you have resistance to something, or you have this burning, of discomfort, of passion, of like, okay, this is hard, but I'm going to keep moving through it, and you relax into it, you practice the surrender that I'm talking about, and you do it in accordance with your plan, which lines up to your goals, which, fits into, everything else, like the man that you want to be. As you do this, eventually what ends up happening is this discomfort, it drives a neurological adaptation. And as that adaptation completes, eventually that sacrifice essentially has been consumed. It has been completely burnt up. And the result then is that this is no longer difficult for you. So it's like something that was once outside of your comfort zone is now inside of your comfort zone. And so that's the psychological transformation that takes place. And we have to voluntarily face that. If you're just trying to skip the discomfort and just try and push through it, it never happens. You're going to have to push through it forever.
And
But if you do it this way, then eventually it just becomes second nature. It just becomes who you are.
From a practical level, when you look back at your goals, so if you have 1, 2, 3 things that you're going to do, or actually your plan, right? So let's say you have 1, 2, and 3. Number 3 is the part that you're finding resistance, and you have to do this thing with. There's transmutation, right? Well, the energy that it creates, that you have to use to get through it without transmuting it, like you were just saying, where you're like going, ugh. Well, that takes a lot of energy. Now, imagine you take that energy, you actually are, using it to transmute through it, so that you're not going to have to use that energy next time. Now, imagine, like we were talking about, this blazing fire of like movement towards your goals. What happens is you don't have to use that energy for that anymore. It's going to be a lot less energy. And then there might be another piece of the plan that maybe requires it's something new will be revealed, maybe. And every time you come to those resistances, you battle through it through the transmutation. That way you're just kind of flowing. You just end up having this like super, high speed highway This is what we're talking about. That's why the triangle's on fire. So it doesn't feel, the more of those you do, you don't feel like you're really working hard. You're just flowing and your passion is just emblazing and you're going, burning anything that wants to come in its way.
And this is where coaching, I think, helps a lot with this, is identifying those key points and getting help walking through that process. But not everyone can get coached by Mark or one of his there's only so many people who you can coach. So if someone's at home and they're saying, I want to do this and I don't want to, I can't get help right now to go through this process, how can someone do this practically at home? Is it through journaling? What's a good way? What's a home remedy you would recommend?
Well, get the guide. Okay, download the God Mode OS guide. Make sure you understand this stuff, and just start like you said. Journaling is a great way to do it, but really, it's the intentionality. It's like a lot of these concepts are pretty automatic if you understand them, and you just got to line them up. Now, lining them up and dialing them in, that is why we offer the coaching, and we are currently taking people for the new pilot program for this. I mentioned earlier I created a new course and everything, but that's pretty much what we want you to do. Is like we want you to actually apply this kind of stuff. And if you have questions, like one of the things I'll say is that if you have questions specifically about the program, or questions about how to implement this stuff, leave it in the comments. Those are things that I'll always try to respond to, because I really want to make sure that like this content gets out there to you guys. There's we got a free PDF guide that you can get on this. And then we also have a follow-up video series where we talk about this stuff some more. So you can get all of that stuff by clicking the links in the description. But really, like I just want you guys to start using this thing because it's insanely useful. It's transformed my life, and everyone who I've taught it to has said the same thing. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much for being here today. It was really a blast getting to talk to you and Derek. It looks like Derek already had to go, but Pete, thanks for being here, man. And yeah, and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Yeah.